Well, thank you so much to everybody who is here. Ellie and I are really excited to share this class with you guys and the content in these slides because it's really near and dear information to our heart. So as I'm sure you all know, this course is about buying a house as a business owner or a freelancer or a 1099 worker. Anybody who's take home cash might have a little bit of a disparity between how it may look on your taxes. So these are tips, tricks, and real life strategies for different kinds of loans that are designed specifically for you, and then how to actually go about writing an offer and buying a house. Okay, so for today's agenda, we'll quickly do some introductions, talk about, ourselves and who are we, and then jump into why buy a house at all. Are there actually benefits over renting, and the way that your beginning homes can be the launch pad of generational wealth to come. Then Ellie will walk you through the loan process and your finances. So pre-approval, budget, buying power, all about your credit, asset, and liabilities, and then different options of loans for your income types. And then we'll jump over to my section. I'll start talking with you guys about the overview of my market, which is, I work in the East Bay area of California, which is a pretty specific and intense market. So this part is kind of hyper local. And then I'll talk more generally about determining, conditions of a home and repairs, how to judge the health of the structure, and then what are contingencies, when to remove them, and how to strengthen your offer and write one competitively. And then we'll give you guys time to ask questions at the end. Okay, I'm going to pass it off to you, Ellie.
Well, thank you, Ellie. Also, it's always so weird when you both have the same name. First time it's ever happened, so I love it. So I bought my first house in 2012. I was 25 years old, and I know it was a different market back then, but it completely changed my life. I had been coming out of a really dark time of my life. My teenage years were not great. I made some really questionable decisions, and I did not ever think that buying a home would be something that I could do. And when I did it, everyone thought I was crazy, but I did it anyways. And I'm so glad that I did because it absolutely changed pretty much everything about my life, especially my financial trajectory. And it really taught me that no dream is actually ever out of reach. So, as a lender, your dream is my dream. If your dream is to become a homeowner, then that's my dream for you too. And my promise to every one of my clients is to work as hard as you are to make that dream come true. And I think that's something that Ellie and I really vibe on because she also bought a house at a very young age and it also set her up on the same trajectory. And we both have a really deep passion to lead with authenticity, integrity, and first and foremost, education. And so, again, that's what we're all here to do today is to just share with you that it is possible, even if you might feel right now that it's not. So, Ellie, I'm going to hand it back to you for your introduction.
Hi guys. So I was born and raised in the Bay Area. I lived my whole life in Albany and Richmond. And I work in partnership as a realtor with my mom, who is a fifth generation Bay Area local. My dad is a contractor, and so I bring a lot of that construction background into my practice, and it's a really important part of the way that I work with my clients because, as we all know, beyond a house is a furnace and a foundation and a roofing system, and so it's really important to me that my clients understand the structure that they are purchasing when they buy a home. I went to UC Berkeley. I worked in tech before I was a realtor, and all of that, various background and skill set has come together to do what I do now, which is pretty much a dream job of helping people, successfully be stewards of a property and build generational wealth through real estate here in the Bay Area. Okay, let's talk about your first house and the power of that first home, which we often call the starter home, and the way it can be the launch pad into your future homes and eventually a dream home.
So, I bought my first house in 2012, and you can see it there. It wasn't pretty. I had to make some sacrifices. It wasn't necessarily in like my dream neighborhood, but I knew that if I could make this happen, that it was going to change my life. And so I was willing to adjust my mindset and make some sacrifices for a short period of time in order to further my goals. So my mortgage at the time was only 1350. This house had three bedrooms and a basement. I rented out the other two bedrooms and my basement, and my friends literally paid my mortgage for me. So I lived for free in my own home. I think I only charged them like $500-600 a month in rent, and we were able to live there. And I was able to build all of this equity in that house. So I bought it for 174 with a $3,000 down payment, and I sold it 3 years later for 350,000. During that time, I received about $40,000 in rental income. And when I look at the whole picture and subtract my down payment, my closing costs, and some of the improvements that I did, and then add in that rental income, I earned about $210,000 when I sold it. At the time, I was a bank manager for Wells Fargo. I was making like 50 grand a year, not making very much, and I had a huge return on my investment. Some of the minor improvements that I did, I had the windows replaced and I painted the interior, and I removed one window and added a sliding door so that I could access the backyard through the area that faced it. So all that said, I did pretty minor things to it, and I was able to take that equity and then roll it into my second property. And before I give it back to you, I will say, as I mentioned, I've made a lot of questionable decisions in my lifetime, but the only thing I truly regret is selling this house. And I sold it when I was 28, and I moved from Seattle up to Bellingham. I didn't feel ready to own two houses in two different cities, so I sold it. However, today, this house, even though it's not that pretty and it still looks about the same, I've scoped it out again, and it makes myself a little bit sick because it is now worth almost $900,000. So I know that I would have had to have held it for 12 years, but still taking a $3,000 initial investment and 12 years later, it's now worth 900 something thousand. You can see that you have an opportunity, if you can buy and hold or even buy and sell, to make a lot of great income on that. Now, one other caveat, we're going to have a living expense no matter what. Like, unless we're homeless or living with our parents, we're either paying rent or we're paying a mortgage. So, yes, the market has changed, but it is still a wonderful option considering you're going to have a living expense anyways. So, Ellie, let's hear about your starter home.
I bought my first house when I was 24, so it was about 4 years ago. I bought this house in East Oakland. So if you're from the Bay, you probably know Hagenberger or the area where the Coliseum is. So this wasn't too far from that. Ellie touched on the idea of making sacrifices to get into a home just so that you can start earning equity as soon as possible. And so living off of a busy street, right off of 73rd was like definitely not my dream neighborhood, but what I loved so much about this house was the feeling of earning money off of my money every single month, and the money that I earned 2 years later when I sold it. So I bought this house for $650,000. I put down 3.5%, which was, let's call it 23,000. It was literally every single dollar that I had. I borrowed against my 401k. So I had a job where I contributed to a 401k and they matched my contribution. So I was able to borrow against it. I sold some stock, and then it was just like literally all the savings I had been able to build up over time. I lived there with two of my girlfriends who rented out rooms. And over the 2 years that I lived there, I received $48,000 in rental income. And I did very, very little to the house. Like, it had gray, like laminate flooring that I hated. So I ripped it up, put down hardwood, but otherwise I barely touched anything. And I sold it, I held it long enough to avoid capital gains tax. And then I sold it 2 years later for $700,000. So, subtracting my down payment, the closing costs, and then adding the income that I got from renting, I earned about $70,000. So, like, yeah, it wasn't the neighborhood I ideally would have lived in, but it was I was willing to make that sacrifice for $70,000. So it's about 200% return on my investment. Um, Ellie, I hear you about holding houses, but I didn't have the choice. I had to sell this house to buy my next house. But I will say it truly changed my life. It probably would have taken me honestly about 10 years to save $70,000. And it was what I earned in 2 years. So that is, in a nutshell, the power of the starter home.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, but what if you can't stand roommates? So I know for a lot of people that's just like unbearable and out of the question. And I hear ya. So this is a case study of a real client of mine. I represented her in the purchase of a condo. She bought a one bed, one bath condo really recently. We closed in September. It was $305,000, but I negotiated a $15,000 credit back to her from the seller for her closing costs. So she only put down her down payment, that $10,000. All of the rest of the cost to close were paid by the seller. So we can call it $290,000 purchase price. And her payments are $3,400 a month. So if you look at rentals in the Bay, that's about $1,000 more per month than if she rented a one bed, one bath apartment. Okay, so granted, she's paying more than she would be paying in rent, but I ran the numbers on these units before we put in an offer. And the units in this complex increase about $20,000 a year. So let's project ourselves 4 years in the future. If she had been paying rent in an apartment, right, $1,000 less, and then just setting aside that $1,000 into a savings account, she'd have $48,000 saved in 4 years. Pretty amazing. But instead, putting no money aside into a savings account and instead just paying her $3,400 a month mortgage, if she decides to sell in 4 years, she'll likely be able to sell it for $80,000 more than she purchased it for. When we subtract her down payment, she'll have passively earned $70,000 in 4 years. So you can, live in an apartment, save money, and have a nice 48 grand at the end, or just live in that same apartment, but you own it because it's a condo and have $70,000. So that's 600% ROI. It makes sense to me.
One thing I will say too, it's really hard to make yourself be that disciplined to save $1,000 a month. And so I've heard this term, the forced savings account. Again, we're going to have a living expense anyways, but if you do pay your mortgage, it is like a forced savings account that you can't touch until it's time to either do a cash out refinance or sell the home. So it's a wonderful thing. I personally know that I don't have the relationship with money where I'm disciplined enough to save $1,000 a month. I like to go on adventures and do all these kinds of things. But using the equity in my home has been an incredible way for me to force myself to save money and earn equity in a way that I never could have before.
Yep.
So, why buy at all? Well, really, we're talking about planting for the future. And I like to use the analogy of getting on the train. It doesn't matter if you are getting on at the caboose and at the very end or in the captain's chair at the very front. When you get on the train of home ownership, you are automatically going forward at the speed of that train, which is so much faster than everybody else who's walking or taking public transit like the bus or driving a car, sitting in traffic. The analogy being, again, getting on the train is that forced savings account. You are on a fast track to building equity in a way that it can be very difficult to do when you're just trying to be disciplined and save money. So the term house hacking, we talked a little bit about it. We talked about renting rooms. Another option would be to buy a property with a mother-in-law unit or an ADU. There's also purchase programs available where you can buy a house and build an ADU at the same time with the same loan. Another option would be to Airbnb while you're out of town. I have some very dear friends of mine that live in a mountain town and they've got a cute little condo and they Airbnb it all the time. They will go stay at their brother's house or they'll Airbnb it when they're out of town and they pay pretty much their mortgage every month with the income that they get from renting out their house for a few days a month. Pretty great. And another option would be, traveling nurses as a form of short-term rentals as well. Ellie, why don't you talk about the compromises? Oh, you muted yourself.
Oops, hi. So, when we think about our dream house, it's probably like I want a big yard and I want my favorite neighborhood and I want to be by my friends and be able to walk to stuff, right? But there's a reason that those things are so desirable and, usually we like the things other people like. And so all of those wonderful traits are what jack up a home price. So when we are thinking about our first ever house, what are the ways that we can compromise? Like, what are the things that we're willing to give up? And if we can't pick anything, then the compromise is not owning a house, right? So, no decision is a decision. for me, the worst compromise was not buying something. So I decided to compromise on area and move far away from my friends and family. I lived in Oakland by the lake, but I, moved deeper east. And then I didn't like the yard, and the backyard flow was kind of awkward. But I knew all those things were temporary, and that if I could give up some of those things, I would be, in the short term, I'd be closer to getting them in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. Next slide. So before we get into loan process and your finances, Ellie, why don't you drop that poll? So I'm curious to see where everybody is at in their journey. And I can't see it, so you let me know if it's working.
Yeah.
Yeah, there we are.
Well,
So
guys,
let's talk about where you are in the process. Are you pre-approved and actively shopping right now? Are you maybe thinking in 3 to 6 months you would like to be able to make an offer, 9 to 12 months, or maybe a year or more? So let us know.
I'm seeing majoritively year plus.
Okay, great. And
So
that's
these people
awesome.
really, really pre-planning. Couldn't
Yeah,
be me, but I
I
commend you.
Girl, I love that. And the reason why, especially when you're self-employed, there's a couple reasons. When you're self-employed, we're usually looking at 2 years history. So starting early is really important. The other thing is if you think about home buying, like it's right up there with getting married, having a baby, and buying a house. So that's a big thing to do. And I like to think about it like an airplane, right? The bigger the airplane, the longer the runway we need. And so the longer time that we have to prepare, the better off we're probably going to be by the time we get into the air and start making offers for you. That said, we are in a really crazy market, and I can't tell you how many times somebody's like, well, I'm thinking of it like a year away. And then 2 months later, they're like, but this is my dream home. So, my advice to you is even if you're a year out, let's start getting you ready now. And we're going to talk about how to do that. So here's the basic pre-approval process. I'm going to rip through this pretty quickly. We're going to have our initial consult, and this is where we're going to decide, okay, are we ready to take an application, or do we need to come up with a customized plan, savings, credit repair, liability management, things like that. Let's say we move forward with the application. You're going to take about 5-10 minutes to fill out an online application. You can do it right from your phone. It's super easy. We can also do a soft credit check, so it's not going to negatively impact your credit score, even if you're like a year away. This is what's really important, is to get that plan set up early, and you want to have real numbers that apply to your life so that we can make a true plan for you. During that application process, we're going to do some document collection. We'll get into the specifics of what that is in a couple slides. After that, we issue the pre-approval, and that's when you start the really fun part of house hunting. I cannot stress enough, please don't be surfing the internet looking at homes and daydreaming and Zillow shopping if you're not pre-approved, because it will break your heart. So I highly suggest let's get you started now and just get some solid numbers in your mind. Then you can start dreaming and looking at what you want. After the house hunting and you decide on one and you make an offer, and hopefully it gets accepted. I will say in competitive markets, it's oftentimes that you'll need to write an offer 2, 3, 4, 5 times, depending on what's going on. In 2020 to 2022, when rates were so low, the average offer was between 6 and 8. So that just tells you you've got to have some strength and some grit to get through that. Getting told no is never fun. But again, the more prepared we are and the more competitive we make your offer, which we're going to get into competitive strategies as well, will get you in the right spot. So once that offer is accepted, your contingency timelines start. Ellie's going to go over contingencies as well in her section. We get into underwriting, appraisal, and inspection. So the appraisal and the inspection are two different things. The appraisal is what the lender looks at to make sure that the house, the collateral that we're lending on, has the appropriate amount of value based on how much we're giving for it. And the inspection is really there to protect you as the buyer. So we're going to get into that more as well later. After the underwriter looks at the whole file, they're going to issue us a conditional approval. And that's really simple. All they're going to say is, hey, we need an updated bank statement, or we need a letter of explanation about this large deposit that we see in your bank account, things like that. It's usually a couple of days process to get those collected, and then we submit them for our final approval. And that's when we move on to our clear to close and our funding, record with the county, and you get your keys to your new home. It's so exciting. We love that part. So what happens if we don't fix in the box? Now, I'm going to be honest with you, a conventional loan product is going to have better rates, lower down payments, But there are other options available, and that's why you're all here today, is to learn, what do I do if I don't fit inside the W-2 box? And this could very well be your ticket to get on the train. And then you can always refinance the loan. If you get into a house with maybe a bank statement loan, you don't love the terms, give it a couple years, we refinance you into a conventional product and you can enjoy the better rates then. Or maybe it's time to sell the house and upgrade, whatever the case might be. So a few options that we have that are not inside the box, this is what we would call a non-QM loan. So a qualified mortgage is your standard, FHA, VA, conventional, all those kind of government program loans that are bought and sold on the secondary market. A non-QM product is going to be more of a portfolio loan. So this is anything that's a bank statement loan where we're looking at 12 to 24 months of your deposits in your bank statement or in your bank. A P&L loan, so we're going to be looking at, your profit and loss statement. A no income loan, if you really can't prove anything, but you have lots of assets and you do have some money, there are no income products. And then a DSCR loan, and that is a debt service ratio loan. So we are looking to see, does the rent of that house cover the mortgage? And if it does, you don't have to show any income for that at all. The approval is given based on what the house can earn you. So self-employed documents and strategies, I want you to make a little asterisk in your head. I want you to start a folder on your computer, and it's going to be your mortgage folder. And I want you to start getting into the practice to save all of your income documents, and maybe you're already doing this, but save all of your income documents, your taxes, your 1099-Rs, anything like that, into your mortgage folder. That way, when it comes time to apply, you don't have to scramble around to 8 different places to pull these documents. You've got them ready to go. So while yes, you can save money in the short term by writing everything off on your taxes, I don't want you to rob Peter to pay Paul. Don't shoot yourself in the foot. The extra taxes that you might pay for 2 years, because remember, we need to see a 2-year history of your business ownership, is going to be nothing compared to the increase in equity that you'll enjoy by owning a home. And you do get tax benefits as a homeowner that will save you even more. So we're going to talk about taxes really high level, but our next webinar on April 9th, we're going to get into the nitty gritty about taxes, write-offs, when it makes sense, when it doesn't make sense, things like that. So typically documentation that we need if you're self-employed is 2 years of your tax returns, 2 years of any 1099s, 2 to 12 months bank statements, depending on if you're going a bank statement route, you're going to need to submit at least 12, maybe 24, and then a year-to-date profit and loss. If we're kind of in the middle of the year and your taxes look so much better this year, we'll take that into consideration too. Income budget and debt to income ratio. So debt to income ratio is one of the key things that we look at when giving an approval for a loan. And it is this right here, basically all of your debts plus your new mortgage payment divided by what you make. And here's a caveat. When you are self-employed, we're looking at your net operating income. So we're looking at that bottom line. If you're a W-2 employee, we're looking at the top line before all your deductions. But because we're all self-employed here, we're looking at that bottom line net operating income. So 2 years income or a 24-month average. If you're submitting taxes, we're going to take the net operating income from the last 2 years, add it together, divide by 24. So I really want you to think about, as we're in tax season right now, filing your taxes with intention. That said, again, our bookkeeper that we're going to bring in on April 9th, he is an absolute wizard. And sometimes you can have somebody else look at your taxes if you've already filed and kind of renegotiate those books a little bit. So he's going to be a great resource for you. Super excited to introduce him. Something that's really important is your monthly survival number. So this is really tying into budgeting. If you haven't yet, and we're going to send out a budgeting tool at the end of this so you can have something to kind of put some numbers into paper. Monthly survival tool is exactly what it sounds like. How much money do I need every month in order to survive? So you got to make sure that that monthly survival number is met before you go looking at, oh, I'm going to spend $5,000 a month on a mortgage. Pre-approval amount versus a smart budget. And this is kind of what I was talking about up here. Just because you're approved for a really large mortgage does not mean that you have to spend all of that money. It might not be wise to purchase in the top of your price range. It might be better to buy something a little bit less expensive and make yourself a bit more comfortable and secure on a month-to-month basis. And the debt to income ratio we already talked about. So this is an example, and of some taxes that I pulled. You can see in the top corners here, 100,000, 200,000, this is 3 and 4. The reason I wanted to pull this up, and fair disclosure, this is not self-employed taxes. Self-employed taxes are actually worse than this. So this is just to kind of get some numbers floating around in your mind so that you can think about, should I write it all off? Should I not? Should I go full bank statement? Do I want to qualify for P&L? And we're going to compare these two again on the next screen. But you can see, like, after these deductions, this is what you're actually making. And kind of a good rule of thumb is if you're on the left side of the screen over here, if your business is in, let's say, the $200,000 range, probably want to write off less and apply for the loan with a conventional product. If you're making a lot of money on this side, then the tax benefits might be much better for you to write it all off and take the higher interest bank statement loan. And we're going to compare them here. So I want you to go line by line with me, conventional versus bank statement. The minimum down, we're going to just round up to 5%. In some cases, it could be 3, it could be 3.5, but for today, we're going to look at 5% down. If you go bank statement, it's 15% down. So you have to have a lot more cash on hand if you do that. The minimum credit score, let's say you're experiencing some challenges with your credit score, we'll go all the way down to 620. Sometimes on FHA, we can actually get that all the way down to 580. So there's a lot of more options if you are credit challenged with the conventional products than with the bank statement. As you'll notice here, 680 is the minimum for bank statement loans. Maximum debt to income ratio for an FHA loan is 55%. For conventional, it's 50. But over here on the bank statement loan, depending on which program you use, it can be as low as 41% and up to 50. Reserve requirement. This means how much money do you have left in your bank account after your down payment, after you purchase this house. And so what Ellie said was she used all of her savings that she had. She could have not used the bank statement program because she would have needed 3 to 6 months of her mortgage payment in liquid savings in order to use that bank statement loan. And then we're going to look at a specific example. So loan example, $650,000 purchase with 5% down. In this example, we're going to talk about someone who's making around $200,000 in taxes, like we talked, or in income from the previous slide. Let's say their average for the last 2 years has been this amount. Their net operating income divided by 12 gives us 10,802. Now, I know I said before we're going to average 2 years. So just for the sake of today and easy numbers, I went with 1. But in your mind, remember, it's 2 years. 50% debt to income ratio means our max debts, including the mortgage and your car payment, your credit cards, everything else, cannot be more than $5,400. So in this example, 650 purchase, 5% down. That means a $32,500 down payment. Probably going to have around $20,000 in closing costs, which could be covered by the seller. Interest rate on this example is 7%. We're buying it down 1.12, which is going to cost $68.67. That's included in this $20,000. We do not need any cash reserves. So our total cash on hand that we need to have is about $52,000. Principal and interest, taxes, homeowner's insurance, mortgage insurance. Mortgage insurance is any loan that has less than 20% down. You're most likely going to have mortgage insurance. The total payment here is $51.65. Now, let's say you're in the other category. Let's say you're making lots and lots of money, and it makes sense for you to write off as much as possible so that you can save on your taxes. So in this example, we're going with a $400,000 income. We wrote off $100,000 in write-off, and it's going to save us $48,000 in taxes. The bank statement loan does their income calculation a bit differently. They're going to look at all of your deposits into your business bank account, and then they're going to divide by 50%, which is called an expense ratio. So in this example, it's leaving us with $16,666 as a monthly income. The down payment, we're going to go with a bigger purchase price on this one because we're making more money. $850,000, 15% of that is $127,000. Closing costs are higher because of the type of the loan. Interest rate is a bit higher as well. Points are higher, so it's more expensive. and you do need to have cash reserves. So in this example, with the bank statement loan, you're going to need to have a lot more cash on hand. And I'm not saying any of these things to scare you, but I just want you to have enough information to be able to think through, how should I be filing my taxes? Principal and interest, taxes, insurance. On this program, mortgage insurance is variable. When I priced this out today, I found a program with 15% down. Even though it was less than 20, we did not have mortgage insurance, and the total monthly payment is here. So I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just wanted to give you a real life example of what it looks like today to buy a house, conventional at 650 or bank statement at 850. And when you work with a good lender, they're going to be able to tell you all these things. You don't have to know what program you qualify for. That's what your lender is for. But I just want to give you guys enough information to start thinking about these things. So understanding your credit. It's a 3-digit number. We probably all have all looked at it, but it's fluid, right? It's basically a snapshot in time of how you manage your money. So that said, we're going to be looking at 5 different things. Payment history is the most critical, heavily weighted component of your credit. So make your payments on time. Whatever you got to do to make your payments on time, I beg you, please do so. Especially if you have student loans, be really careful, because I know a lot of them were in deferment, and then some people were going to have them forgiven. But some people got stuck in a place where they said they were going to be forgiven, and then they weren't, and now they're delinquent, and now their credit score is taking a hit for it. So just be really careful, and I'm happy to consult with anybody about, excuse me, about this. I'm going to grab a sip of water. Amounts owed. This is relating to your revolving credit. So let's say you have a credit card that is a $10,000 limit. I would love to see you stay below 50%, ideally below 30%, meaning that you don't leave a balance on there month after month. In this example, that would be more than, $3,500 or $5,000. Length of credit history, types of credit, and new credit also play a role in your credit score. So when we are talking about credit in relation to your loan, like I said in the beginning, work with a lender that can give you a soft credit pull. This will not have any impact on your credit. You also have a rate shopping window. So when it comes to mortgages specifically, there's a 2-month window where you can apply with as many lenders as you want. And at the end, as long as they're all mortgage related inquiries, it will fall off. Now, again, that's if they're hard credit pulls. My suggestion is to work with a lender that can do a soft credit pull, and then you don't have to worry about the window. Trade line requirements. This is something that people sometimes struggle with. I love to explain it. Trade line simply means how many credit components you have open. So a car loan, a credit card, student loan, those are all different examples of a trade line. And typically lenders want to see 3 of them open, usually for 12 to 24 months. Every lender is a little different. It's good to know, kind of what you need there. But if you have more than 3 open, you're probably just doing just fine. We talked about the revolving credit usage, and then looking at your credit and how it relates to your interest rate. A lot of the times people will come to me and say, well, I have an 800 credit score. Why am I getting this interest rate? Well, it's because there are 6 different things that go into what rate you are qualified for. And credit score is only one of them. They're also looking at your loan to value. So that's how much money you're putting down as your down payment. In our previous example, 5% versus 15%. Occupancy type. So if you're buying this as a primary residence, or if you're buying this as an investment home or a second property. Property type. So that's going to be a single family home versus a manufactured home versus a 4-plex versus a 10-plex. Those all have different, what's called loan level pricing adjustments. All of these things do. And so that will add or subtract points to your interest rate. The loan program. So VA versus FHA, those all have different. Bank statement loan has a different rate than a conventional loan. And then the loan term. So anywhere from 10 years on your loan all the way up to 30 years on your loan, those also will have something to say with your rate that you're approved for. And Ellie, it's your turn. But before we hop in, let's do one more poll. We want to know what's most important to you when you're house hunting.
Okay, I'm launching it.
Okay.
It's launched. Also, while I have you, Ellie, Ben has asked, I've been answering questions in the chat, everyone, so please keep your questions coming. But this one, I can't answer this one, Ellie. So bank
Ben.
statement loan, usually 1.25% more, or is this just an example?
It's just an example, but again, it does depend on those other things that I've mentioned when it comes to the rate. So I have a client right now I'm working with. They have a very challenged credit situation, actually, because they thought their student loans were in deferment. They started going into their repayment period and they were sending his payment information to his old student email. Well, it's destroyed his credit. So he's at 680. So his
Yeah.
cost for that loan is actually much worse. Now, yes, bank statement loans are typically about a percentage or more than a standard loan. And for the comparison I did today, a few slides ago, I used a 740 credit score. And you can see the difference, 740 credit score, two different loan amounts, two different down payments, but you can see that the rate was still significantly different.
Cool, thank you.
Yeah.
Um, okay. And people answered the poll and said majority location. Okay, that's really smart because that's the one thing you can't change.
That's right.
Okay, let's hop in. So this is about house hunting in the market, rating competitive offers. Really quick, I'm just gonna talk about the East Bay Area real estate market. This is the part that's really local, so if it's not you, you can tune it out. But the way it works in my market where I work is that the majority of the time we have multiple offer situation scenarios, which means the houses go on the market for 12 days. They set a single offer day and time, and all of us write and submit our offers at once. So this is great for sellers because multiple offer situations mean lots of competition, but it means that as buyers and as buyer agents, about half my clients are buyers, we work really hard to write a beautiful offer. Our list prices are about 20% below the seller's expectations. So maybe you've noticed that you see a house on the market for 850 and then it sells for 1.2 million and you're like, what the hell happened? That's the way it is on purpose. This is a strategy that listing agents do. They list below where they want it to sell. If you think about Berkeley as kind of the central hub, and it's about 40% under the expected sale price is the list price. And then as you move north towards Richmond, El Sobrante, and Pinole, that number gets closer to 20. And then even farther north, like Vallejo and onward, that number becomes more and more of a true transparent price. And then the same in the opposite direction, so more east. Our most desirable traits here are 3 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, specific neighborhoods that have proximity to restaurants, so that word walkable, or views. You usually can't have both because views are in the hills. And then people love remodeled kitchens and bathrooms, which don't fall for it. It's totally easy and way cheaper to do it yourself. And then large flat lots, and then of course good structural condition, quote unquote good. So I'll talk about that more. The way it works, when you start working with an agent, and what I do with my clients is that I have an introductory meeting, talk about must-haves, I talk about where you could compromise, and then we go over the cadence together. So you'll be looking at Zillow, I'll be looking at the MLS, I'll be going on tour every week and seeing new houses as they come on the market. And then if there's one that you like, I'll be sending them to you, you'll be sending them to me. If there's one you want to see, we'll go together. I like to tour with my clients because there's a lot of stuff that I want to teach you and talk to you about. And then if we've worked together for, a couple, multiple weeks or months even, then I'll start saying, okay, go by yourself to the open house. Maybe you don't need me there on this one. And then if it's the one you love, and you want to write an offer, we'll review the packet. I'm talking about the disclosure packet. So that's the whole story and background of that house. And then we'll write the offer together. Some strategies that we'll talk about is compromise, which I think we've touched on a lot. And I don't bring it up to dash your dreams, but just to be realistic, because I want you to be closer to your dreams. And if you can identify where you can compromise, then, on your next house, you won't have to compromise. So, and then we'll talk about sweat equity. So my own house, it was a total fixer. It was like a grandma house, and we gutted everything and redid it all ourselves. And, probably made about 3x on increasing the value of the home, 3x what we put into it. So If you are willing and able, doing remodel work yourself is incredibly valuable. And then we'll talk about contingencies, and I'll hop into that more in a minute. So, right now, actually, contingencies, maybe this is a word you've heard thrown around. So, there's a couple ways to make your offer really beautiful. Of course, there's the price, but I get into contract as the winning offer kinda all the time, actually, not as the highest price, and I choose offers as a listing agent not as the highest price because terms can be as or more important than the dollar amount. Your terms are how quickly you can close, and this is something that Ellie can talk about in more detail, the other Ellie. But your contingencies are, something that we'll talk through. Contingencies are in place to protect the buyer. So, basically, they are, exit plans. They're ways that you can cancel without losing your deposit. Okay. Often winning offers will be non-contingent. So the buyer has removed all of their exit plans. They're saying we are not canceling no matter what. And if we cancel, you can keep 3% of the sale price. You can have our deposit. That's how committed we are. And that commitment is a really powerful thing. So the three main contingencies are inspection. That's the ability to cancel if you have any additional findings after exploring the house more. Appraisal. So if the bank values the home at less than the sale price, you can cancel and get your deposit back. And loan. Loan contingency means if you can't obtain a loan for whatever reason, your loan falls apart, you can cancel. So you can see why it's a buyer might want to keep these and why it's really valuable for a seller if you waive them. Okay, so how do we remove these contingencies while also protecting ourselves? By doing extensive due diligence. That means that we do all of our work and research up front before writing the offer so that you as the buyer you've completely satisfied yourself with all of the information you ever might want to have about this house so that by the time your offer gets accepted and you're in contract, you already know everything. There's nothing more to uncover. You're completely confident you're getting your loan. You don't care if the house appraises or not because you have enough money that you can make up that appraisal shortfall. I'll talk about that terminology more in a minute. And you've already inspected because you have a construction conscious agent who knows what to look for.
Let me say one more thing here,
Yeah.
unless we have it coming up. Sorry if I jumped the gun. One really wonderful way to waive your financing contingency is to work with a lender who can fully pre-underwrite your file prior to making that offer. Sellers love this because it is saying, I know I'm good. My bank, my lender, they signed off on it. So what I do is we collect all your documentation up front.
On
We
my
send
loan
you,
slide.
oh, sorry.
Oh,
Okay,
it's
well, I'll
okay.
wait.
I
I'll
give you
save
a
it.
shout out on my loan slide.
Okay, sorry. Say it.
No, it's totally okay. Actually, here, why don't we jump there right now? So your
Okay.
loan contingency is collaborative between me, you, and your lender. If I'm your realtor and you're you and Ellie's your lender, this is something we all work on together. So
Yeah.
go ahead, Ellie. Sorry.
Too excited. Yeah. So going through underwriting completely, that means that the underwriter has looked at your bank statements. They've looked at your any kind of income that you have, and they have already said, yep, green check, they're good to go. The only thing that we're waiting on is the appraisal, and you can close. And another reason that we love doing this is it can help you close in a very competitive timeline. In different markets, there's different things. So, and also like when it's really hot or when it's not. So, on average, people like to have a 30-day, or buyers might like to have a 30-day escrow period, the time from when we make the offer to when the funding goes through. But in a competitive market, you want to shorten that time frame. Down in Ellie's area, it's already shortened. The average, I think, is 21 days. We can get even more competitive if you're fully underwritten, and we can close it in as little as 10 days. And that is super attractive to a buyer or a seller.
Yeah, totally. So these are all ways to strengthen your offer beyond the dollar value. Your appraisal contingency is, we touched on it briefly, but if you are being financed by a lending institution, the amount that they are lending you is not based on the sale price that you and your agent came up with. It's based on how much they value the home for. So at some point during the escrow period, an appraiser comes and values the home. And if there's a shortfall, meaning they value the home for less than you're in contract for, you are responsible for making up the difference. This is why having more than 20% down can be, really behoove you. Okay. And now we're getting into my favorite stuff. So, um, removing the inspection contingency is kind of the big one, because an inspection is a really broad term. It can mean anything, right? It's like anything that you uncover about this house. And especially in my area, our houses are old. We don't have a simple product. It's a complex housing stock. So removing your inspection contingency is very powerful and very valuable. And that's why it's um, like literally worth tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars to do construction-based due diligence so that you can write, that offer with an inspection contingency removed. And this is why I use, structural information and knowledge so much in my practice, because of how valuable it is to my clients. So removing your inspection contingency is only wise, however, if you've satisfied yourself completely with your investigation prior to writing your offer. Oops, I think you skipped ahead, Ellie. Thank you. So there's a couple ways that we do this. Listing agents will often prepare at some level of inspection. So they'll have procured a home inspection, most likely, and they'll have procured a pest inspection. So we will read and analyze these in great detail. A home inspection analyzes the major systems of the home, looks at roof, foundation, siding, furnace, water heater, electrical, plumbing, etc. And often, if the home inspector is good, they'll advise if an engineer is needed. If they're not good, I will know, and we will have our own inspection procured. Pre-inspecting before writing an offer or inspecting once in contract are choices that we make based on the scenario. If it's not competitive, we might be in a position where we can just get into contract without an inspection contingency and procure our own inspection once in contract and then negotiate down the sales price. So I've done that before, too much success, but it's not always the case. Oftentimes houses, there's tons of people lining up to write offers, and so no such luck, right? So in that case, we'll pre-inspect. That means we walk through the house with whoever is necessary. We have older foundations, in Berkeley and Oakland, often about 100 years old, homes built in the 20s or earlier. The service life of a foundation is about 100 years, and pre-World War II, no foundations had steel reinforcement, which makes them really prone to cracking and movement, particularly in regions like ours that have expansive soils which expand and contract dramatically as moisture in the air changes. So in these older homes in Oakland and Berkeley, I observe cracked foundations all the time. If these cracks are severe, meaning they're displaced, imagine that house bouncing up and down on that foundation in an earthquake. It's just not seismically sound. So that's a case where we would walk through with an engineer and get, a fuller picture. And there's other circumstances like old wiring. Maybe we'll bring an electrician through to bid the cost of removing knob and tube and replacing with Romex, for example, or the same with galvanized steel plumbing to replace with copper, or any number of professionals that we'll bring through to get more information or cost of improvements. That's what we do in advance, so that by the time you write that offer, you're like, yeah, I already know everything I want to know. Pest inspections. Okay, pest inspections look for wood destroying organisms, fungus, beetles, dry rot, termites, and then they write a bid to repair that work. It's really important that we know that, because it can be hundreds of thousands of dollars hidden in the floor joists or in the framing behind the stucco siding, or to the untrained eye, we often can't even see dry rot. We certainly can't see termites. So this is an important one. If the listing agent doesn't provide one, we'll procure our own. The natural hazard report is a statutory disclosure, so it's mandatory in the state of California that it's generated for you by a listing agent. This is a really important disclosure because it will tell us the different zones of hazard that the home is in: slide, fire, liquefaction, dam inundation, earthquake, flood, to name a few. These different zones will determine insurance types and the types of retrofits that you need. So if you're in a fire zone, I'm getting you an insurance quote before we write an offer, because you might not be able to be insured by a company. You might only be able to get insurance through the California Fair Plan, which can be 5 times the cost of a normal plan. That's really important due diligence for us to do in advance, right? I mean, that would be horrible to discover later on. If you're in a liquefaction zone, like all of the flats of Berkeley are a liquefaction, that means that homes are built on fill, so soil basically that was built up in marshland, and it responds to earthquakes like water. So shakes a lot, and so the type of retrofit we would do is driving piles, deep into bedrock, and then that are bolted then to your foundation. And anyway, I'm getting a little into the weeds here, but the point is that this information determines all kinds of things about your house, and you don't have to know them. I will tell you, but this is the reason that we do this investigation in advance. And then after we've done all of this, we'll list out all of the needed work and the timeline to do it. So not everything has to happen right away. Sometimes a foundation that needs to be replaced can limp along for a couple more years. Maybe it's something you do 5 years down the line because it's just a one-story house, and if there was an earthquake, you don't really fear loss of life. So that's down the road, but the roof's leaking, so that has to happen before the winter. So we lay out that timeline, and then I'll help you assign a dollar value. I have tons and tons of numbers in my head that are the cost of work that's performed on a house. And so we'll paint a picture for you of the final cost. Okay, and then we're ready to write our offer. So once we've gathered all of this information, we come up with the offer price together, and we come up with the terms together. So I'm never gonna tell you what to do. You tell me what to do, right? I work for you, but hopefully I can provide enough information that you can make that decision. So if you feel like you know everything that you need to know, and Ellie is your lender and she's fully underwritten you, and um, we have no fear of appraisal because it's Berkeley and houses sell for $1 billion all the time, and so we rarely underappraise. And you're like, yeah, I feel totally confident writing a fully non-contingent offer. Great, that's your terms. Then we're going to talk about price. So we'll come to price based on comps. Maybe that's a term you've heard, but recent comparable sales, which I will gather for us based on the data that's, it's available to me. So I'll gather it for you. And then we'll talk about the value of the home and what it feels like the value is to you, because that's your emotional reaction is an important part of it. And then we submit that offer along with the pre-approval letter from your lender, which talks about your, financial viability, basically. And if we win, we go into the escrow period. Like Ellie mentioned, in my area, escrow periods are about 21 days, but often fewer. And I will guide you through the escrow process. Okay, great. So that is the end of our presentation. I'll pass it back to you, Ellie.
Yeah, so now what? So your next step in the home buying journey as a self-employed person is to meet with your lender, get pre-approved, or create a specific plan. Again, I highly recommend that you do fill out an application early and get some solid numbers, and meet with your local real estate agent. And again, we would love to work with you. We make a fantastic team, and we're here to serve you. So in the meantime, make sure to join us. I've mentioned it a couple times. You can take your phone and scan the QR code, and it will take you directly to the link for our next webinar on
Oh,
April 9th.
I'm gonna put the link in the chat right now, everybody, also.
We'll drop the link in the chat where we're going to dig into the tax specific side of things. We're going to bring on Mike Ross. He's a co-owner of an incredible bookkeeping firm. They are going to give us, we're going to talk about tax specific things as well as a few more self-employed related programs. And in the next webinar, we're really going to focus on maximizing your purchase power while navigating the complexities of taxes. The tax expert, Mike Ross, will discuss practical strategies that help you make the most of your hard-earned money, tighten up your write-offs, because that's always the question, and understand which business structure has the most tax benefits for you based on your current and future goals. So maybe you're a sole proprietorship right now, maybe you're growing and you want to turn it into an S Corp. There's also some different income benefits to and tax benefits to how your business is set up. And we're going to look at those tax benefits based again on those current and future growth goals, as well as share strategies to help you qualify for the house that you want. So join us on April 9th. Scan that now. And we're
And
also
I'm
going to,
gonna answer some questions that
oh,
came through.
yes, yes, please.
Okay, so someone said, do you have experience/tips for writing a letter to a home that is abandoned and not currently for sale? So, no, I don't, except Of course, you can write a letter that's full of emotional appeal. But these are really hard. And I understand why this is a really attractive idea, but it's very complicated when one person is represented and the other person isn't represented. So if that person agreed to sell their home to you, it would be really important that that person procured representation of their own, because after 2008, there's a lot of laws in place to protect people in financial hardship. So it's totally possible, totally doable. Often an agent will represent both sides for a nominal fee, which is, you know, that is legal, that somebody can, it's called double ending. But I'd love to talk to you more about this because this is a very scenario, specific question. But
Yeah.
but I see it and I want to acknowledge that
You
question.
should definitely talk more about that, like one-on-one.
Yeah.
But one of the things I've done, I really wanted to buy a piece of land in a community that had a lot of like foreign investors that lived there, and people, especially during COVID, they weren't coming down to that area because they couldn't travel. And so what I did is I took that property address that I wanted and I researched on the tax assessor's website. So on the tax assessor's website, you can see who the owner is. And then you have to like go real PI on it to find out how to contact them. But at least it gives you a jumping off point of like who might own it. So there's lots of challenges
Yeah.
involved in that.
And so I've also done this.
Yeah.
And sometimes these abandoned homes are in foreclosure and you can actually pull tax bills off the internet. It's all public information. And so if, you can see the list of properties that will come up for public auction, and that's another option, and you completely sidestep this issue of representation because the home has already been, taken by the county. So that's more info there.
Do we have more questions?
Yeah, 90% of my wealth is in Bitcoin. Can I use that as collateral? Not collateral, but if
There,
you can cash
there,
out.
there are some things that are changing with that. I don't believe that it has been solidified yet, but I think it would be a great opportunity for you and I to, again, sit down, have a conversation. Let's look at your application together and come up with a strategy. And then in the meantime, if you schedule with me, I'll make sure to research that for you and find a specific plan that can address your needs.
Totally. You two are great. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much for responding to that. Do you think we should wait until market and interest rates are better before looking to buy a home? I don't. Every
No.
month that you wait for rates to go down is equity that you're losing. People who
Yeah.
waited since last year have lost tens of thousands of dollars in potential equity.
Let,
Um,
let me add some
yeah,
things in.
hop in here.
Girl, let me go. Let me add them. Okay, so in 2020 to 2022, when rates were 2, 3, and 4%, first of all, we're never going to see that again. And you should hope that we'll never see that again for a couple of reasons. So during that time, I did a bunch of research, like as rates came back into the fives. Caveat, for a 30-year period, so like the last 30 years of our home buying history, the average interest rate for a 30-year mortgage is 5.5%. So yes, we're a little bit above that right now, but we're never going to get back down to where we were. Now, can you buy the rate down? Absolutely. There's lots of different strategies. You can do a 2-1 buy down, temporary buy down, permanent buy down. There's so many things that we can do. But during that time when interest rates were so low, everybody and their mother and brother were buying a house. And that drove prices sky high. The average person in that time period overpaid by $60,000. So right now we have an inventory shortage. We have literally millions of people who are pre-qualified to buy a house, but as the rates go up, they can no longer purchase. So as those rates come down, your neighbors and everybody else is waiting to buy a house. And all that's going to do is jack those prices up again. Now, this is really scary. For me personally, I have a big heart to help the everyday person buy a home. I think that it is a huge part of the American dream is to own your own home. And if that's your dream, then I definitely again suggest do not wait. Get pre-approved now, and yeah, we can wait and see what the market does. But to Ellie's point, the longer you wait, the more equity you're missing out on, the more money you're wasting on rent, and the more expensive it's going to get. You can always refinance your rate. You can never renegotiate your purchase price. So today, and I actually have a now or later scenario that we can run. So I would love for you to schedule an appointment with me and we will look at your specific scenario. And then we'll look at what happens if you wait a year and rates come back down into the fives, what's that going to look like for you then? So, highly suggest you get ready now. Early and often is my favorite motto. Let's have that conversation. And then you can, again, to Ellie's point, it's all up to you. You get to decide. So, if there's truly nothing in the market that suits your needs right now, maybe we do need to wait. Maybe we get you ready and you can wait, but then as soon as you see it, you're ready to go. Because the last thing you want to do is miss out on the opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, just I concur with all of that. Prices were never lower than when rates were high, is what I'll say. So if
Yeah.
you can get in when rates are high, it's the best case scenario. And
Yeah,
then,
and say goodbye to, any kind of seller's credit when rates come down. It will then be a huge seller's market. Buyers are going to have to come with their best, most competitive, and sellers aren't going to care about your letter from the heart or if you need help with your closing costs. It's going to be a crazy race all over again. So I highly recommend get with us now. Let's get you on a plan and see where it takes you.
well, I concur. Okay, cool. That was the last of our questions.
Our last slide. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to drop our emails in the chat. They are at the top, I think, but also here they are one more time.
Mine's actually Ellie at District Dash Homes. Here, I'll
Oh,
put
no,
it.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, it's totally okay.
District Dash Homes. Drop it in the chat so they have the right one. My apologies.
That's okay.
And we're also going to send out this recording as well as a budgeting tool that I had mentioned so you can figure out what your monthly survival number is, as well as a buyer's guide for you. And again, I hope to see you all at our next webinar on April 9th to talk more about tax strategies. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.